Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 5 of the Modern Game podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about midweeks, how you should approach them, should you be targeting them, and everything in between. Josh and I have both had some success in midweeks recently, and generally, I've observed that there has been a slightly lower points requirement to take home a prize in midweeks. The question, I suppose, to start with is how much emphasis do you put on midweek, and has that changed? Because I feel last season everyone was like, midweeks, whereas this season it seems to be like, with the reallocation of prizes and the new tournaments that have been added in, suddenly midweeks seem a bit more interesting again. I think that's probably a good way to start and open up with, and get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that I really like, and I chose this topic this week because I've just won in a midweek, haven't I? So
I just wanted to flex. It's just a flex topic.
It absolutely is, isn't it? Let's be honest.
You've also brought forward the recording, which does make me wonder if you're going to try and turn this podcast into one of those like rewards opening YouTubes, which everyone seems to do. So it's nothing more than a flex this week. There's no valid content for the listeners. It's just, hey guys, by the way, here's an hour of me talking about the fact that I won.
My midweek win. Yeah, absolutely.
Although you did beat some pretty tough competition. There was a lot of a late surge from AZ who completely trashed Dundee. I did enjoy, like, in the chat, it was like, oh, watch out, AZ are coming. And there's me, like, wanting AZ to win, mostly so I get midweek utility for Reinders and Odegaard. And surprisingly, Reinders' absolutely stonking performance last night dragged me into the prizes with a 4-man team. But it was just watching your anxiety, knowing that there were players like Visa Card who were just running full AZ stacks, hunting you down.
Yeah, so Visa Card and Copters were both hot on the heel. Well, they weren't actually ever that hot on the heels. They were always like 50 points away. I mean, I ended up winning by like 51 points, but it just felt like it was inevitable. Like I was bracing myself for the onslaught of like the 60th minute mark, when it gets to 60, and like they both play 2 defenders as well. So I was like, oh shit, like there's going to be like a 50-60 point swing here. But yeah,
the player that both let them down Bakuma. Was I was going to say Bakuma was the one that both let them down, wasn't it?
Yeah. When Danny DeWitt scored the 6th and Visa had him, I was like, like this is just terrible, and it was only really because Marco Gruhl scored that I did manage to hold on to first. If he hadn't scored, it would have been a hell of a lot closer, especially as he was my captain. So that really allowed me to pull away. So I think your original question, like how much emphasis do I put on midweeks, is I'm not even sure I know myself, because at the start of the season, when everyone was like planning their teams, I heard like lots of talk about who the go-to goalkeepers are, especially in U23. You want your ones that have midweeks, etc. And I feel like midweeks was a really hot topic when we were like coming into the European season, like who's going to have midweeks. And I feel like lots of people were putting like a lot of thought and emphasis on having midweek utility, and I was sort of like completely opposite. I was like, lots of people were saying I don't want the Zenit players or any RPL players because they've lost their midweek utility with obviously the Russian Premier League, all the Russian clubs not being involved in Europe. And I was like, well, I'm just going to buy them anyway, and then on the weekends when you don't have them, I'm going to run them and they're going to smash and I'm going to win. Like, there's, if not as many people want them, one, their demand's going to be lower, so their price is going to be lower, comparatively to other players. And 2, when I play them and they do well, like you're not, Joe Bloggs is not going to have them, and they're not going to be playing them against me. So I was like, sort of blasé, fuck the midweeks, and I'll just focus on the weekends and try and win the sort of big tournaments and the big prizes. And then it sort of came into this Europa Conference League and Europa League quals and Champions League quals. And I think the main thing for me is like, obviously, which games are assigned coverage, which is always a sort of question at this stage. Like, I've got a full Dynamo Zagreb stack, but none of they've had loads of European Champions League qualifiers, but none of them have been scored. And yeah, there's a point for me where I was like, and it was last midweek, so not the one where I've just won, but the one before. I was like, right, I can make a team here if I buy a midfielder. And it was a point where I was like, do I want to buy a midfielder so I can play a team in midweek? Like, how much value do I actually put on this? In the end, I went out and got Alexander Prass from Sturm Graz because I have other Sturm Graz players. And, I felt a 2-leg tie against Dynamo Kiev, he could do reasonably well. And, it was probably more luck than judgment for me that he did get an assist on Tuesday night and shot a 74 and, was part of my winning lineup. But I think that was maybe more me just like, I don't want to say DJing, but I was like, right, I want to play midweek, so I'm going to buy this guy now because I need him to create my lineup. And so I feel like I haven't ever placed that much emphasis on midweeks, but I think that's really starting to change. Like you mentioned, the amount of points required to win a prize midweek compared to the weekend is quite significant. Now, right, the division I've won in Challenge Europe D3, you actually needed 370 points for a tier 2, which is 365 points, sorry, for a tier 2, which is very similar to what it was at the weekend, only a few points shy. But that is with Azen Alkmaar winning 7-0 and them being one of the more sort of popular plays in that game week. So I think your point there is very valid. And I think, like, moving forward, it's a real consideration for me, like who plays midweek. I think I've always done it to a certain extent with some of my goalkeepers. I've only got one RPL goalkeeper, I think, Gilya Lantratov. I know I have Matvey Safonov as well. And Lantratov was a speculation buy based on he might go to Zenit and, that sort of thing. And Safonov, I needed the U23 GK. And I sort of had the same thought process, if not as many people are buying him because they want to buy a goalkeeper with midweek utility. He's got a cracking AA score, could do well on the weekends for me. But I think with the majority of my goalkeepers, I've kept to Simon Mignolet, for instance, because he's going to have midweek utility. I could have sold him. He's not always in my weekend lineups. And to be honest, maybe he shouldn't be in my midweek ones because his matchups are not going to be particularly favourable in the Champions League. So I think, the original question, how much emphasis do I put on midweeks? I think, very consciously, originally, when I was planning my lineups, I did not. I was sort of thinking, I'll keep these goalkeepers about and I'll always have spare players left over. I'll just chuck them in some lineups. Midweeks have never normally been particularly good to me, essentially. And then now I'm like subconsciously coming around to the fact that actually these are viable, valuable tournaments to be entering. And I should probably sort myself out to a stage where actually, I've got some of the better midweek cards. Yeah. And I think that when I say the better midweek cards, I think is a really interesting topic. Like I've just said, Mignolet is a midweek goalkeeper playing for Club Brugge. So in his domestic competition, he's a very, very strong player. He should be. I mean, he hasn't started the season very well. His AA has been okay actually, but they haven't got many clean sheets. But he should be, one of the best goalkeepers in Belgium, and therefore one of the better ones in Challenge Euro, and in some cases All-Star. But then when you move him to a midweek setting, like, his effectiveness is really diminished, right? He's not going to be playing Circle Brugge or, somebody like that in a Champions League game. They might have one team in their league which is ranked below them, but the other two are almost certainly they're going to be huge underdogs, right? And especially the team from Pot 1 that goes into Club Brugge's group, they're going to be huge underdogs and likely to concede 3 goals a game, which essentially makes Mignolet a useless card, right? If he's going to concede 3 goals a game in 3 of the, how many group games do they play? 6. Yeah, 3 of the 6 group games. Then for 3 of those games, why am I even bothering lining him up? He's going to score with the new scoring matrix 5 and 15. You may as well not have a goalkeeper. So I think a really interesting point is how do you identify who the good midweeks are, right? Like you go on. I'll let you have it.
I was going to say, I think at this point you can't until the groups are drawn, but you can make a speculation on it. And I think what is really interesting is you use the Club Brugge example, which is they're strong in their domestic league, but they then unfortunately go into the Champions League where they're just, the likelihood is Mignolet doesn't keep a single clean sheet in the Champions League. And then they go out. Like, that's just like the reality of it. Whereas on the flip side, you've got Villarreal, who are one step away from being in the Europa Conference League groups.
Right.
And they could be a team that are actually not very strong at the weekend. Like, don't get me wrong, they've got some good players like Parejo, Moreno, Pau Torres if he stays. They're, with all due respect, average when it comes to Champion Euro at the weekend. Champion Euro in the midweek, they could be bossing it. Because, like, Bayern could get drawn against Barcelona or Inter Milan or,
City or whoever.
Exactly. All the strong champion Euro teams are going to be in the Champions League. And the likelihood is that there's going to be 2 strong teams in every group. So there are going to be weeks where, Bayern aren't guaranteed to crush it, or, Real Madrid aren't going to keep a clean sheet. So then, and you'll see, you'll have like Villarreal playing like a team from Baku, or the relative strength of the opposition is going to be ridiculous for a club like Villarreal if they take it seriously. And I think they are one of the ones that, they are a club that loves a cup run, so I think that they will take it seriously. But all of the other, like, strong at the weekend, not strong in midweek, it makes for a really interesting dynamic, because also then the rotation plays in. So, to go back to last year, I ended up not focusing on midweeks at all, because I tried to focus on midweeks. And unfortunately, Anderlecht got booted out of the Conference League at the hands of the Test. In the qual stage, which wasn't scored because of Opta's weird relationship with Belgium and the fact that they just don't score Belgian teams in the qualifiers. So I'd set up, and I basically had a hybrid stack of Benfica and Anderlecht players. I think I had it was Van Kronbrugge, Hout, maybe Yari Vasharen, Rafa, and Yaremchuk from Benfica. And then the issue that I had then was that as soon as Anderlecht were booted out, I was like, well, I bought Anderlecht because I believe in Anderlecht. I'm not just going to sell Van Kronbrugge and Hope because I want a team that are playing midweeks for the sake of it. But then I had this weird scenario where I didn't have a full team. But what was happening is that Rafa, for example, was playing in the midweeks when I didn't have a goalkeeper, and then getting rotated at the weekend when I did. So it all depended on the composition of my gallery. And I think that that's why it was an important step for you, because you were one step away from a competitive midweek team. And at the point that I was at, I was essentially 3 steps away. And to be fair, Yaremchuk was being rotated anyway. So I was almost like, in all arguments, like I was 4 steps away from actually having a competitive midweek team, which just at that time, I wasn't in the position, like gallery size, to do that. So I then made the decision, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to sell my Benfica players, because there's no point having them in midweek and the risk of rotation at the weekend when, I need them at the weekend, because that's when I've got my Van Kronbrugge and Hout combination. So I actually sold them and bought a pairing from Eupen. I bought Steph Peters and Shmuel Prevliak, because I was like, based on the rest of my gallery, it makes sense for me to be targeting weekends, because that's when I'm likely to be the strongest. Albeit I know the competition is going to be stronger at the weekends. I'm in a much better place, and I've got a much better shot of lining up 5 competitive players at the weekend. So that's what I focused on. There was a point throughout the season where, I'd won a couple of prizes and I pivoted out of Peters and Prevliak, but my whole focus was players that are going to play at the weekend. So, I ended up grabbing Junior Ito when Genk had got knocked out of Europe. And, I sort of knew that my weekend challenger squad was where it was at. This season is completely different, and kind of by chance, if I'll be honest with you, because Enzo has just landed at Benfica and started absolutely crushing. I went out and bought Szymanski. And my plan was that I was going to run Szymanski and Gedson in my under-23s. And that was predominantly weekend focused, because Besiktas don't play midweeks. But Szymanski and Feyenoord will. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to, I'm going to optimize for the weekend, but I'm going to, sort of make a bit of a split. And it was a couple of weeks ago where, sort of midweek, I was like, oh, okay, hang on a minute. I've got Enzo and I've got Odegaard, and I think it was Badiashile. I was like, oh, I've got actually quite a strong core here. I'm just missing a midfielder. So I bought Tiani Reinders. And then I was like, well, hang on a minute. Actually, if I look at this, and this is just the qualifiers, if I look at it, I've now got probably some of the best options after winning Sutalo as well. if all these teams get to the group stages of their respective tournaments, I've potentially got some of the best under 23 options for midweek. So then it makes sense for me to really lean into that and prioritize, particularly with like Odegaard fit and, AZ, fingers crossed they get through the next round. But, AZ in the Conference League group stages, like, I mean, they saw what they could do at Dundee last night. Like, it was like last season watching Feyenoord go on just an absolute rip-roaring run through that Conference League, thinking,
that wasn't fun.
Should have bought Cockatoo and Sinistera then, shouldn't I? Because they were just ripping the midweeks, and basically you knew that whoever had those cards, every midweek they were getting something. Like they were absolutely yielding from those cards. So I suppose the question for me is, am I going to prioritize midweeks more? Yes. Do I fully know who I'm going to have yet? Not at the moment, but I'm going to keep a real close eye on that group stage and potentially free up some ETH so that I can pivot my gallery into having like an absolute smasher team for midweek based on the draw, because it will all come down, and that like there will be some teams that you'll just look at their draw and go, okay, wow, they're going to crush. Particularly in the Conference League, where you do end up seeing some horrible mismatches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, as we sort of we saw last night with AZ, they completely smacked Dundee. But this week, I know it's the qualifying round, but Rapid Vienna are going to play a team from the I think it's Swiss second division.
It is,
who have qualified via the Liechtenstein FA's place that they award in the FA Cup that they hold in Liechtenstein, which is interestingly the only regulated tournament held in Liechtenstein. So it's just, you end up getting, like, from a Sorare perspective, just ridiculously mismatched fixtures, and I feel like I've got a couple of really good pieces. Arguably, I don't want Benfica to go into the Champions League, which is where it comes like a really interesting, like, you're willing your team to like get knocked out, but at the right stage of knockout, so that they fall into the tournament below. So, an ideal situation for me would be like Benfica going to the Europa League, PSV going to the Champions League and getting absolutely spanked each week. It's just, I don't know, it's a really interesting one when you think about it, but it's about, for me, looking at those mismatches and which teams take it seriously. Because, you go back to that point around the under 23 goalkeepers that you mentioned earlier. And at the moment, there's really not that many of them that would play midweek. It's, Donnarumma, it's Costa, who are both going to be in the Champs League. So they're not, I think Donna's like the clear one, but he's like 60th. Winner, right? Yeah, he's like 60th, which is just like nuts. Even for like a gallery of my size, I'm like, I can't justify Donna. Costa is probably going to have a fairly tough draw,
isn't he, in the Champions League?
In the Champs League. Hedl, if Vienna get through, brilliant. Alban Lafont would be a midweek goalkeeper, but he's going to be one of those ones where they're quite good in the midweek, but at the weekend, he's not like, Lafont is your like go-to under 23 goalkeeper. Like Nantes could get smacked about in League One. So then you're like, you're paying like over 2 ETH just to run midweeks, and you've got a guy that's kind of, he is serviceable at the weekend, don't get me wrong, but you're not getting real, you're not getting favorable matchups for Nantes most weeks.
Sure.
Outside of that, you've got Luis Maximiano, but then the issue with that is that Italian teams seem to not take any. Maybe. Yeah, they really do. They don't they're purists. Unless they go to the Champions League, they don't care. Like they're like, I don't want to win no second tier or third tier cup. What is this bullshit?
It was the same last year. If you remember, Roma were in the Europa Conference League, and everyone's like, Roma are going to be absolutely ridiculous, and they lose 5-0 to like some team from
Bodo
I can't remember where. Whoever. I can't remember where it was. Yeah,
Norwegian.
It's like that. It's like they just weren't bothered, I guess.
No, and it's the same. But I timed it quite well last season because I knew that Ejif Elmas of Napoli and Marash Kumbula of Roma, They wouldn't get near the team at the weekends, but they'd be rolled out in the B side for the midweeks when they would have, slightly better fixtures. So there's sort of weird quirks like that. But I think for me, like, I have felt that my gallery has put me in a more favourable position to win in midweeks. I understand that it's going to change. The landscape will change when everyone comes online and it's the group stages proper. Like we're almost playing like a false tournament at the moment because there's only some covered and it's not every team, and then not every team that's playing is getting covered, and then you get some wild swings in the fixture strength. And actually, once you get to the group, like the group composition in everyone should be like one or two good teams, one average team, one poor team, realistically, right, based on pots. So it'll be about timing it. Some of them could get lucky based on the conference league having like the champions path. So it's like if you're a champion of your league, you're going to get into pot one anyway, which ends up like throwing up a few slightly weaker groups because not all champions are equal. Mm-hmm. But I suppose the question here is, for me, I'm now looking and thinking, okay, well, how much should I spend or how much should I commit to a midweek under 23 goalkeeper? The question is, like, how much value do you place on that midweek utility? Because I don't think we can say that Donna is high priced because of midweek utility. No. He's high priced because he's just going to be an elite goalkeeper in that PSG setup. I think you'd probably argue that Heddle's price is boosted because of midweeks. I'd say Lafont's is definitely, because Lafont's not a serviceable goalkeeper in champion. Like, you're only using him as under 23. And even then you're sort of stretching and hoping for those good fixtures. So I don't know, like, have you ever thought about that? Like, what would you, do you place a premium? If so, what kind of premium would you place on someone having midweeks?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think this takes like me back to my sort of earlier point. Like, at the start of the season, I didn't care. Like, if there was someone that had midweeks or didn't have them, I was like, I'll maybe go for the one that doesn't have them so I can get them slightly cheaper, or they're maybe slightly stronger at the weekend, and that's where I want to play them. Last year I had Unestall and Proper who weren't playing any midweeks and therefore played every single game that they were available at the weekend. And I think the thing that always makes me chuckle is like people that buy Joey Veerman was the big one last year, right? He signed to PSV. Schmidt would rotate the hell out of PSV, and everyone was like, "Oh, is Veerman going to play this weekend?" And I'm like, "Well, there's literally no way to know. If you want the midweek utility, you have to sort of, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain, baby." So that was just sort of the way of it. And I think, so I do place the value on midweek utility. I think we can see it. I think U23 goalkeeper is the place where it's most tangible. Like, you can see it easiest, right? You've got Nicholas Heddle, who, is a decent U23 goalkeeper at like 2.5 ETH. Actually, his floor's down to 2.2 now. I wonder if that was like in speculation that they'd get knocked out last night. But anyway, it's still holding at 2.2, so I guess not. And then, like, how many years has he got left, by the way? Oh, wow. He's U23 until 2025? Jesus.
Yeah, he's got a long time. Let me bring it up, actually. Let's have a look. Just for reference, going to bring up the player rankings. Let's have a look at the all positions, goalkeeper, under 23. And let's have a little look and see.
And then we can have a look at and like compare him to someone who doesn't have midweek utility.
Yeah, it's a filter by value. So, wow, Heddle's up at 2.5 now. So let's have a look.
Daniel Odoyevsky, who is like, I don't know, maybe some of that price is down to his starter status. But he's got many fewer mints, and he's like nearly an ETH cheaper on last sale. Because I presume, well, one, because his starter situation is unclear, I guess. But I imagine because he has no midweeks.
So yeah, Heddle at 2.5 is an interesting one. I do wonder how much of the fact that his age plays into this, because you see, like with Van der Voort, for example, he's got many years of under 23 utility left. He's at 2.5. Heddle's at 2.5, but he could have that midweek utility. I'd almost argue, if you look, Lafont and Maximiano seem to be priced similarly. That to me suggests that people believe that
they're the same age, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, they're the same age. I'd argue that Maximiano's probably in a stronger team relative to the league than
Yeah.
Lafont is. But then there's that risk of Italian teams just not taking midweeks as seriously unless they're in the Champions League. So I don't know, like when you talk about like a comparative for Heddle to understand like where he's baked in price, there's no one really here of similar sort of standing and price. I suppose you could argue De Kaiser if he was fit and if he was locked and playing, but it's very hard to actually compare him at this point. Like, there's not really a lot, is there? I mean, Murich's price, I just don't understand. Like, that's mental.
Yeah, it
but
seems
then,
wild.
Arguably, he does sort of have midweeks because of the way the championship
fixtures
works. But
I
that
feel
just
like
seems like nuts.
Yeah,
for him.
I think like Odojewski, when people presumed he was locked, was going for, well, did they ever? I think so. So when people thought that he was like the goalkeeper, which now I think they maybe still do, but it sort of depends if Ivan starts at the weekend. But he was going for like anywhere between 1.8 and 1.9. And obviously he doesn't have midweeks, but plays on the best team in his league. Yeah. So I think like, and obviously Heddle's like sold for 2.5 previously, but now floors at like 2.2-ish. So I think maybe that's like, it's not great. I think you're right though. There's no real like clear comparison to him, and therefore it's quite difficult to judge. But if Rapid Vienna were out of the Conference League, do we really think he's selling for 2.5, 2.2 ETH? I think he's. I don't think so.
No, I think I'd probably agree with you there. I think that, if he's out, then people have a choice between Heddle and Van der Voort at similar prices. And do people go for Van der Voort because there is a perception that he is a higher standard of goalkeeper, and you obviously know what his career path is going to be, and he doesn't have the winter break, which is another factor which I think like will really hit Heddle's price later. If they don't qualify, then the fact that they're not midweeks and winter break probably sees a little bit of downward pressure on Heddle's price.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with that as well. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I think the premium, like, I don't know, obviously the one example I brought up to you sort of before we started streaming is the Konyaspor players. Because we would, I was sort of saying these Konyaspor players, I'm really interested to see what happens to their price now, because people have been presuming that these guys are going to be playing midweek football, right? They're in the qualifiers. They should probably get midweek football. And I feel like, the goalkeeper you've brought Sehic up on the screen here, I think is a really interesting point. Like I think like goalkeeper is the most valuable position when it comes to midweek football. So like to see his price drop off there and just that number of sales there were yesterday. I don't know even if some of those sales are actually speculating that Konyaspor are going to win and therefore the price is going to rise when they feel like they might go qualified again, right? So I feel like that is interesting to see his price drop from, what is it, like 0.1 to 0.08 or something in the limited world? Something like that, right?
So interestingly,
maybe even lower.
All of these sales were after they were knocked out. They were all actually. This was earlier. So this is odd. There was some slightly before, but the majority of them all happened after they were knocked out. So there was a very, very conscious sell-off of Sehic last night in limited once they got knocked out, which is wild, really. And what I always find really interesting is limited tends to, because of the liquidity and the volatility, limited always is a very good indicator of where the price of rare cards is going to go in about a week or 10 days. It just, everything happens quicker. So the fact that they were only knocked out last night, we can already see that price trend. And like this is a goalkeeper that only a matter of weeks ago was selling for 0.11. Latest sales last night, people were selling them off for 0.07, 0.0725.
And if you look at the rare now, sorry mate, just to cut across, but if you look at the rare now, one was auctioned off 3 days ago at 1.17, and now the floor is 0.92.
Yeah.
So I feel like this effect's been compounded in rare, basically, just
Yeah,
because more
but
people.
nobody's actually taken it yet.
No.
So it'll need the next auction to actually really like
Find out true value.
reset the price to find out the
Mm-hmm.
true value. Because the fact that nobody's buying now at 0.9 is really interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what it does to his. I wonder what it does to his value.
Yeah, but I feel like that is a good indicator that people do. Like, that's 0.2. That's a 0.25 ETH. That's not it's not a small. I think that's a really good indicator that at rare level at least, and we can see it at limited level as well, even though on a smaller scale. But at rare level at least, like people are placing like really high priority on buying into midweek cards, because I can only presume that his previous sales are driven because people are presuming that he's going to get midweek utility, right? So
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see where that next auction ends up, and I think that gives you a good idea of like how much people value midweek football.
Yeah, I'm worried about the price of my York side handle now that they've been booted out by Dynamo Kiev.
Yes, that is. Yeah, I've got one as well, haven't I? In fact, I didn't even realize that was Conference League, wasn't it? They're not. That wasn't a Europa League. Was that? No, that was a Europa League qualifier. No.
Oh yeah, it was. So they should go to.
They'll go in the Conference League.
Okay. Yeah. Ignore me. I'm happy. Side handle. Question is now: has anyone else? Oh, okay. So I'm not even sure what to make of Side handle's price chart last night. That's absolutely. Oh, it's new cards. Okay, yeah, no, we can't actually draw really any insight from Austria
really make
because
too much conclusions there.
Let's look at rare. Okay, so Side handle's price is holding. Interestingly, they've sold some limiteds, but they haven't sold any rares of him yet.
Yeah, I wonder if there must be some live auctions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a live auction that ends in 7 hours.
Because what this then looks to happen, because to be honest, I'd probably put Sehic and Side handle as like, in terms of weekend options, they're definitely on a similar level.
Yeah, I think Seapan Handle's been like I feel like he's been underperforming SO5 wise for a while. I don't know whether that's just because he's losing lots of points on possession loss or what. But like, if you look at his fit, like he's got like a 41 L40, doesn't he? Yeah, sorry, you got it up on the screen. Yeah, so under the new matrix, he's got like a 41 L40, which is poor and worse than Sehic's by like 11 points.
Yeah.
So,
but Sehic has now regressed to a level that's the same as Side handle.
Yes.
So the question here is, Sehic is a better goalkeeper in terms of scores in the last 15, but Side handle's price seems to be maintaining based on the fact that
having some midweek utility.
Still having some midweek utility, which is really interesting. And actually, them in the Conference League
is better option.
Could end up being quite favourable for them. So, I mean, I think you're right. I think people are definitely baking it in. I think you're trying to use an Austrian example as a bad one in limited because of the fact that people do seem to be very happy paying quite significantly more for new season cards than they do for last season cards. But you've got the other Konyaspor players as well, and I'm not even going to attempt to say this boy's name, but Amir Hadzihamatovich. That sounds
very
right,
nice.
doesn't it? Hadzihamatovich. He's had a big drop off in price last night as well.
Yeah, wow, crazy.
So again, just for listening, like he was selling before they kicked off. Literally 2 hours before they kicked off, he was selling for 0.042. After they got knocked out, the auction was 0.323. So he's literally lost about 20% of his price on the fact that he now doesn't have possibly 6 games.
Yeah.
Like when you put it into context like that, it is wild. But from just looking at these, it does seem to be that the market's sort of baking in somewhere between a 10 and 20% premium on a player having midweeks, which is wild. I mean, next up is Guillaume, and actually, I just don't really know.
I can't make any sense of that. What's happening there?
No. And this is the thing. I think you have to remember sometimes, like, I try to logic situations. I'm trying to figure out what exactly is going on. And sometimes in the limited market, it's just people being absolute degens, and it makes no sense. The fact that his price doubled in limited on the announcements of the new scoring matrix just shows what hype and momentum can do to market value. So I don't really know. Was that?
So all that
Oh,
spike
that
is
was
just before they kick
before.
off. Yeah, it's
The
literally just
spike is
before they
before they
kicked
kick
off.
up. And
So I'm
then,
guessing people are gambling that they're going to get through, and then he goes back
okay.
up a little way, and
So
then they
people
lose.
yeah, I mean, he's literally gone from 0.03 in people jumping in before they kicked off. The next auction was 0.029. So he's lost like 25% of his value just based on getting knocked out. Yeah. It is wild. It really is. But I guess that just really goes to show the importance that people are placing on midweeks.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. The thing as well is like he's not even been eligible for specialist or anything like that. So there's not been the market movement there. So this market movement on the Konyaspor players does purely seem to be people moving out of them based on the fact that they will no longer have midweeks.
Yep,
which is wild. Really,
I think so. Yeah, like you say, for 6 games, it doesn't sound like a lot. I feel like 6 midweeks though is like, I feel like that is quite a lot in a Sorare way. A bit like when you're waiting for like 2 weeks for your players to come back, and it feels like a year. Like 6 game weeks sounds like a lot in Sorare world, but actually, like it probably isn't.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Is like if you think about it, it depends on your gallery composition.
Yeah,
but
sure.
if you could get in a position where you are confident of getting at least a tier 1 in 6 consecutive midweeks, that could be huge for your chances of winning at the weekend as well. So, yeah, I mean, we almost feel like we need to do like a follow-up pod on this in like about 6 weeks and be like, how did you get on shifting your focus to midweeks? But I'll be honest now, like from what I've seen in the past couple of weeks, I really want to lean more into the midweeks. Particularly the specialist as well. Like I noticed in the update that Sorare shared yesterday around the new tournaments.
Midweek, aren't they?
Yeah, rare and super rare specialist and underdog are happening midweeks.
That seems
which is mad. I mean,
there's going to be hardly any entrance in the specialist super rare, surely.
Well, that's what I thought. Like, there's going to be galleries. I think this is like a tournament for Sean Newsham, isn't it? Like, or McBride. Like
McBride,
anyone
McBride
anyone
the midweek specialist super rare, definitely.
Anyone that's got like a gallery of over 1,000 cards is like, yeah, this is the tournament for me. Because I'll be honest, I struggle to put out a specialist.
I can't get one out of the weekend.
Super at the weekend, so I'm not going to chance midweek unless there's like some weird midweek where it's only like MLS and Belgium playing. That might stand a chance. But yeah, I do wonder what that. Yeah, I think we both know who's like the type of manager that's going to win that. Like those are the deepest galleries, the kind of people that like forget what cards they have and then like
I've got this that's eligible.
That one. Yeah. I
think you're
off the rails now.
No, I think you're like how. So I think you're right though, and like I am considering like when we find out the groups. Or like where teams are going, Europa League, Conference League, Champions League. Because like my sort of opinion is if you have like a challenger team in the Champions League, like we saw Ajax do good things last season, obviously with the victory over Sporting, and I think they won all their games in the group stage actually. But that was the first time they'd ever done it in their history. I feel like any challenger team in the Champions League is like bad for midweeks, right?
Yeah.
And then like any champion team in the Europa Conference League is like really good. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like almost considering now, like I don't play Champion Europe because I think it's a waste of time.
Watch out.
I'm like thinking like you say, like with Villarreal, do I just like buy 5 Villarreal players and then run them in Champion Europe in midweeks and be like, yeah, you can have your Real Madrids versus Bayern Munich. I'll take Villarreal versus whoever,
Steaua
someone
Bucharest.
exactly right.
Yeah,
and see what happens. And yeah, they might rotate a bit, but that might even be in my favour if I buy the players that are more likely to be rotated in against weaker opponents midweek. They'll be cheaper. So I'm sort of like semi-considering that. And one thing I am greatly considering is, like we saw with AZ last night, like it just makes me want to go and buy an AZ stack and then like not even play them on the weekend. Just literally because they like an AZ stack, like lots of the AZ players are fine, and I'm not trying to give Alf any like whale energy or whatever. I don't class myself as a whale. But on the weekend, I'm unlikely to need some AZ players unless they've got like a ridiculous matchup.
This
But
is
like
the Josh Forth Flex show, isn't it? Just like, kind of a big deal. Have you seen your prize yet? Have you used the filter
I
strip
haven't.
to see your
It's
prize?
not there yet.
Is that why you're full of it?
But like,
if you win a Sehich, you're going to win a. You're going to win a Sehich as your star.
There's a few AZ players I'd play, and like matchup dependent, I'd probably play them. But like quite a lot of the time, they're like all of them would maybe be sitting. But then if I can rotate them in for a midweek, like, and they're gonna have in the Conference League a super favorable matchup a lot of the time. And yeah, we talk about the 6 group games, but likelihood is that AZ might progress past the groups and also have at least 2 more additional knockout games, and then past there, you don't know. Like, Feyenoord got to the final of was that the Conference League last year? It was.
Yes,
Must have been.
it was.
Yeah. So like Feyenoord got to the final of the Conference League last year. So I am almost tempted to do that, and I am genuinely considering it. Like you say, depending on my price today, I could potentially sell it, buy the AZ team with some extra ETH I've got kicking about, and go from there. But I think wait for groups to be formulated and then maybe really attack it from there, and I think that could be quite favourable.
The thing is, as well, as what's interesting is I think like some of the AZ like people have wondered who's staying, so like there is a chance that Carlson goes, but the one I couldn't understand is Tiani Reinders is 0.2 ETH for a rare, and he has 100-point score even before. Like he smacked 100 last night. But even before that, he had 100-point score in his last 5, and he's just been completely overlooked. And I'm like, he's still U23. The fact that he's U23 and looks to be, I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. You've got him, DeWitt, Odegaard, Pavlidis. Like, you think that they'd all stay. Like that as a core. Yeah. Martin's Indy as well. Like Martin's Indy, like, if you're not worried about under 23, like Martin's Indy's a crusher as well. Like he can
even if you're worried about U23, just get Bukema, right?
Yeah, exactly. Bukema or Kerkez. Kerkez has been playing well, and he's one that sort of benefits from he benefits from the new matrix as well. But I agree with you, and I'm like looking out for that team. And I think like once the draw is made, it will become more obvious who that team could be. Because honestly, like every midweek last year, I was like, I wish I'd bought Feyenoord. Because they're just ripped. And like I tried to think like people who bought Sinistera last season cheap before they went on their ripping run, and the same with Kochu. Like the return on investment they would have had on some of those players just from midweeks alone,
wild,
absolutely insane. So yeah, I think I'm definitely more alerted to it, but I think I'm in a fortunate position where I am more able to adapt my gallery than I was this time last year. I think what I will be looking to do is selling off a couple of players in the next few weeks and looking to be like, let's keep my absolute core players. If I can sell off some of my prizes, I can sell off some of the fringe players and then invest in like, this is the team that I'm just going to run midweek. Probably going to be heavily AZ focused, I will be honest. But if I can do that, then I think that there's just like a real opportunity to yield midweeks. I really do.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. And I think that's something that I will definitely be. Oh, I'm just looking Luka Jovic right now, text.
Luka Jovic, who's Fiorentina now,
Fiorentina can get past 8, can get past 20, which I really don't want them to do because I have 20 cards. But if they can, he could be an absolute ripper in the Conference League.
Yeah, he would actually.
Champion forward midweeks.
Yeah. Gerard Moreno's the one. If Gerard Moreno stays fit, Moreno and Parejo, although I think Parejo is probably because of his age, he gets rotated a bit more. But there's definitely some players like that you just think, okay, well, if they get in a deep run in the Conference League, you're going to do well. I'm not sure I'm quite with you on I'm ready to degen into Champion Europe, but there's a consideration. Maybe in yellows. Should we have a little little dabble in yellows? Just make a nice. I might sell my Pedri. How about this? I'll sell my Pedri prize and see if I can run an entire Champ Euro stack, but only midweeks. That could be fun.
I think almost play it oh no, I better not say actually. I was going to say almost paper trade it, but obviously limited cards still cost money, so that doesn't really work. But yeah, I think that's nice, mate. Yeah, sack your Pedri off by obviously Fiorentina aren't on the platform, are they? But Luka Jovic is there. But yeah, like you say, Villarreal.
They will be. Fiorentina are going to be on the platform in a couple of weeks.
Well, there you go.
When they launch Sorare. Yeah, it's honestly a really interesting one, and I do wonder as well, what other new teams do we get in between now and then? Obviously, Midtjylland of Denmark just arrived yesterday. To everyone's surprise, that was really kept under wraps, and that came in pretty quickly. So I think there does seem to be quite a bit more coming from Sorare. So I think any team that does have midweeks that isn't currently covered, I wonder if there would be any. Would be quite interesting as well. So anyway, yeah, I think I've enjoyed the conversation. I think my eyes have definitely been opened to the opportunities that midweeks present. If you can, if you've got that sort of core, I for one, I'm just hoping Anderlecht qualify. If Anderlecht can get there, then I get a bunch of extra utility for some solid players, which would be quite exciting. Although not Sergio Gomez, because he seems to have bailed on me and gone to City, which is disappointing.
Yeah, that's disappointing, isn't it? That is.
It would have been quite nice, having him play against the Azerbaijani champions. Gomez ripping hundreds midweek would have been fun.
Yeah, you got to love those. I'm just trying to look. Fiorentina have got this. Oh no, they got he was 32. I thought they had a U23 GK. He's 32, not 23. But yeah, no, Gomez against the Azerbaijanis would have been good. But hopefully the rest of your Anderlecht lot can get you. Esposito and Fabio Silva are going to be the midweek U23 forwards, aren't they? In those, in some of those.
Yeah, although it's not guaranteed. Anderlecht have got a pretty tough fixture actually to get through the qualifying.
Oh, really?
I think they're playing young boys, so it's certainly not. It's not guaranteed they get through, considering they got dumped by Vitesse last season. But I'd hope they're in a bit of better place this season to go through. So yeah, we're watching that with keen interest.
Indeed.
Anyway, well, thank you so much, mate. It's been a pleasure chatting.
As always.
Thank you so much for everyone listening in. If you've enjoyed, please jump on, subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, mate. See you later.